G'day, my name's Ben Clisby and I've been roofing 23 years. Today I'd like to share some tips with you to give you a pain-free career in roofing. Roofing snips. Believe it or not, there's a little bit involved in choosing the right snips and using snips. Back when I started, basically this was it. Standard aviation snips and long straights, otherwise known as gilbos. Very primitive, don't use them anymore. But as evolution, we started seeing new things come out, being available on the New Zealand market, offsets, replacement of the aviation snips. The reason why they're called offsets, we're looking at the two together. The aviation snips are very straight. These offsets have got quite an aggressive angle on them, which helps keep your hand away from the material while using them. Then we went from these, the straights, long straights, for cutting your dirty old corrugated, cutting your valley cuts, your hip cuts, and we used to use them to cut up the sheets. Very dangerous, a lot of cuts, bloody knuckles from doing that with these. The replacement stepped up to a compound leverage head and spring release. Also ergonomic handles, grips for your fingers, very nice. And then these were a bit of a game changer. Offset, long straights, snips, very good. They are good for cutting long straight cuts up corrugated sheets, trapezoid sheets, long bits of flat, very good. And then we have mechanical cutters. Seen a lot more of them around, a lot more brands. Milwaukee, very nice design. Pull the trigger, shoot and go. She's got the offset so you're not collecting the material. Then we have like an older style jewel clamp on by Malco. Did the job, cost probably $300 to $600-700 now, but definitely well worth it. For me, roofing, going out doing a re-roof, flashings, these snips here will do the job. Left, right, long straights, long straight offsets. These will do everything you need to do a roof. Let's talk about why you need reds, why you need greens. They do very similar things, but very different things as well, I guess. Reds, left, cut a left radius. Greens, rights, cut a right radius. I'll just quickly demonstrate that now. So, using the reds. On the job site, we don't really call them left and right, so we just call them reds and greens. And now the greens. And you start to know, you pick up a pair of snips and you were trying to do a cut and you go, nah, I don't want this pair, I want the other pair, and you just switch them out. So you're not focused on these are greens and these are reds as such. The other reason you use them is the way the jaws work. They'll push your offcuts or push your material a certain way that you want to go. So if I'm going to fold this down and I knew I wanted this material underneath this side, I would use snip one, reds, push the material under this material, and then I would come and use the greens. And that's push the material under this material, and then it'll fold down. My material's gone where I wanted it, so I wanted this material on top of this, and this material on top of this, and the snips help that. And then you'll get into situations, and I wanted to cut from this corner, my snips can't get into it. The reds can't get into it. So then I would obviously switch them out for the greens. And then when I come to the other side, I want to cut down. Greens can't get in there. The other option is I cut from the other way, or I get the other snips. When you're cutting with your snips, the first thing is you don't want to close them all the way. The jaws overlap each other and they will put defects in the middle. So if I do a sample, and that's me closing them all the way. They're little indentations in the material, which actually makes the material quite sharp, quite dangerous. So when you're cutting, you want to just not quite close them all the way. You want to open them right up and use as much of the blade as you can without closing them. You get a nice smooth cut. While I'm talking on cutting materials, a lot of people get these snips out of the packet, out of the box, get them, first time using them, they'll approach the first bit of material and they'll hold the snips square and they'll start cutting. It cuts, it works, it's great, but there's a lot of resistance in the wrist and a lot of pressure needed to perform the cut. If you actually take the material, line it up with the bottom jaw, and you'll see how the snip sits, it's quite offset this way as well. And line it up with the material and start cutting, the resistance is so much less, you'll really feel it. There's so much less I can cut with just my fingers. Not very neatly, but I definitely feel the resistance. So when you're cutting something, you'll feel it. So you'll have your snips, you'll cut, just tilt your snips and you'll feel the resistance drop right off. And when the resistance is dropped right off, you'll end up with a nicer cut. Snip maintenance. Not a lot to do really. You want to give them a clean every now and then. Don't get them wet, don't let them go rusty. Just to clean them, I just spray them out with CRC. Keep everything lubricated so everything's moving nice and smoothly. Working in sandy areas, sometimes you get the CRC and spray it right in at the spring, keep the spring clean. If the spring gets bound up, they sometimes snap. If you're finding that you're folding over, if you're cutting a small bit of material and you can't really cut anything small because it's folding, generally that means your snips the jaws have got to become separated, so there's a gap there. So the material's not cutting, it's getting bent inside the jaws. You can fix it by adjusting the nut and bolt here. It's actually quite hard to do on these Midwest because this bolt is threaded into the jaw. So to set that gap is actually quite difficult. To be honest, and sharpening, I wouldn't bother. I would just go out and buy a new pair of snips if I was having trouble with a pair of snips. The work and what these produce for you and what they do, you really want to keep them optimum. Sharp, working fine, because if they're working fine, they'll hurt you less, they will do neater cuts and give you a better finish. I want to talk about long straights, what they're good for. Cutting rakes and straight across profile roofing. Got some corrugated here. You've got to have a good technique to cut it safely and cut it nice and neat. So my technique is I normally approach a sheet, I have my mark, I lift the sheet up, start my cut. Then I've got cut one or two ribs, I reposition, put my foot on to hold the sheet from moving around on me. This sheet is my balance, so I start bringing it under the cut. Now if I've got a long sheet, it's going to get heavy when I'm pulling this much up. So I brace on my knee, sheet on the iron, I cut, about 2/3. Gets about there, I'm starting to feel a bit uncomfortable, so I just do a little shuffle, same position again, and then just clear the iron away from my arm. Okay, so now I'll do the cut. I'll show you how I do it. So again, lifting up the sheet, I've got a nice straight mark on here. Okay, iron on top of my foot, foot on top of iron. Start lifting in, If the sheet was long, it would start to get a bit of weight to it now, so I brace up, keeping my hand away from the cut. So all that weight the sheet's putting on my arm is getting supported by my knee. Starting to stretch now, starting to get a bit uncomfortable. Reposition, again, foot on top of the iron, foot under the iron. Same brace. Now just the finishing. Long straights, great for cutting across profiles, not so good going up a profile. So I'm going to demonstrate here, trying to cut up. They will cut, but as I get in there, I've got to push quite hard. Now this material is lining right up with my hand, and it's just getting so awkward now. I'm into the meat of the sheet, and my fingers are going right over the top of this cut. Fingertips are right by this quite ugly cut, quite distorted. That's where the long straight offsets come into play. Right, the whole idea of these is they're in, my hand's away from the material, well away, and they actually just power through by themselves very easily. That's the advantage of the long offsets going with the long straights. So just this year I was at a Roofing Association in New Zealand conference, and there was a couple of chaps there from CHASNZ talking about the ergonomics of roofing. They actually grabbed my attention because they were talking about back pains, wrist pains, and 22, 23 years of this. I know about those back pains, those wrist pains they're talking about. They even still plague me today, and I'm not on tools as much, more in the office now these days. So one action they talked about was stopping these sheets and the wrist movement. I never sat back and thought about these things, the way we did it and how we can change them. But I have been recent, of course. So they're really saying this motion here of grabbing a sheet and bending it and bending your wrist so much is not good. So I thought about this and thought, well, we use, on a lot of products, we get stop-in tools that are made. This tool here is probably 40 plus years old, and it's offset. Now, those old boys were clever. That is offset, you put it in the end of the sheet, and you pull it up till this is 90, and that gives you the correct angle for your stop-in. Now you notice I'm not going to try and do it like this, am I, and turn it up. And it was made with these angles for these reasons. So if I go back to corrugated and think about the same motion, instead of doing this on the ground, you could maybe do it on the roof, so the roof sheet's sitting up, pitched. You're standing on the roof pitch and the sheet's closer up to you. Put the tool in and you're just pulling. A lot less small movement in your wrist. It's just something to think about. Just think about how you're using tools. If you end up sore after a day's work, think about what you did that day and think about maybe if you did it different, do it smarter. Don't be scared to try a different technique. Maybe you were taught the wrong techniques. Just something to consider. Okay, so talking roofing gear, one big consideration is how we carry the gear on us. I use suspenders and a belt, which is from Buckaroo, Australia. It's a very unique belt, very, very good belt, and it's probably the only belt I've seen on the market that's custom made to your waist size. We, as roofers, carry a lot of weight on us compared to other trades, builders, electricians. We definitely carry a lot more weight than those guys, and I suffered a lot sciatic nerve until I changed my whole setup. This has been really good. Now some guys are wearing vests with magnets and things. I'd be interested to know how they go, how they're feeling on site with them. But one thing, as I see quite a lot, is you got different stages of roofing. So you got when you lay iron, when you do flashings, when you're stripping a roof. So if I'm going to strip a re-roof, I'd probably just go up with my hammer, no belt on at the start doing a lot of denailing, and I've got nothing around my waist, no weight on me. When I come to doing the roofing, laying, I only just take what I need to lay that bit of roof. So I like to always have a hammer on me, good to throw at the apprentice. A drill for screwing down, that clips on. I always have a ruler, pencils, pens, few markers on me. Tape measure, if I'm doing hips and valleys, measuring cuts. If I'm straight laying, I might even put that aside. Chalk line for marking screw lines. Knife for trimming paper. If I'm doing hips and valleys, I'll have a pair of snips on me. I'd like to do a lot of cutting on the ground, but come to the one sheet that finishes on a hip, I'll trim it, have snips for that, and a hammer tacker. So that's basically my setup for just laying a roof. It's still a lot of gear, still a bit of weight, and of course I'll have the fixings in the pouch as well. If I'm laying a big run, I'll just take a small amount of fixings to tack off, and then when I'm just screwing off, I'll strip all this gear off and just carry screws, chalk line and a drill. When it comes to flashings, obviously, I'd get rid of the hammer tacker, may even get rid of the chalk line, and then I'd load my long straights and I'd go to my left and rights. Some foldies, then where I had my hammer tacker, a square, and riveters. I love these little riveters. They're lobsters. You can use them with one hand. They're nice and small. You don't have to have your hands so open to close them. Some bigger ones are awkward. You might need two hands. Maybe a bevel. But one thing, if I'm working on a flatter roof, I like to ditch my apron sometimes and load up a tote with the gear I need and put that in a place maybe where I'm going to be cutting the flashings in, have a bucket for the rubbish, and then I don't have all this gear on me. So I'll cut in all my flashings and just tack them, and then I might put my apron back on if I'm going to do the fixings, to carry the fixings off. And yeah, I really like that, having no weight on me, the flexibility to cut in flashings. And again, when I start a job, no apron on, I just have the hammer and denail, way more comfortable. Now, let's talk about drill drivers and impact drivers. Big difference between the two. One, drills and drives, obviously in the name, and one, impacts, rattles, makes a lot of noise. The advantages of a chuck drill, having a chuck, is you can put drill bits in, tick bits in, just by adjusting the chuck, good to go. The impact driver takes hex fittings, which just clip in and then clip out. So they go in a lot quicker, but if you want to use a drill, you have to put them in something or get a special drill bit to go in there. The other disadvantage of impact drivers, so using them on roof screws with coatings, is they can damage the coating. Some screw manufacturers are claiming that they have a coating that's impact resistant. Again, using the word resistant, not proof. I've been to jobs that maybe not very old, 7 or 8 years, and there's no colour left on the original colour screws, and they're starting to rust, and that's affecting the roofing iron. Then the other big drawback is the noise these make. I'll put some screws in with both shortly, but these make quite a lot of noise. We're going to maybe do a decibel reading on that. Now, if they're loud outside the roof when you're working with them, if someone's inside the building, builders working away or plasterers, it's going to be a lot louder for them in an open room, especially like this shed. It's going to be a lot louder for them. And I didn't want to sit there and listen to this, 3 guys on a roof screwing off, listening to this all day. And I don't believe that these are any quicker. I think the reason why guys like them is they're a little bit lighter and more compact. But if I talk about being compact, I find having them compact is a disadvantage because the smaller your setup is, the lower you have to go when you're screwing off a roof. So the more you have to stoop, the more you have to arc your back. I find that very uncomfortable. In fact, I like the drill and I like a longer tech bit to bring me up off the surface, and I'm not stooping as low. The working on pitch roofs, it's good to be square behind the screw and have a long tech bit. Some of the boys at work have got real long ones. They're good for flat roofs. They find them awkward on a pitched roof. So to wrap up drills and impacts, I prefer the drill for screwing off, drilling, basically most of my work. That's my go-to. The impact I still use if I'm doing a lot of square drives, purlin screws, apply substrate. These are great for putting in square drives. They don't slip off. They don't round them out as easy. Don't break stainless ones as easy. So they still have their place. But definitely the drill for the bulk of your roofing work. So here we have them side by side, the short setup and the long setup. The quite a good big difference between the two, 4 to 5 inches. I'll just show you the short setup first. I've got to get quite low to the work surface. My back's, I can really feel it in my back here. Quite uncomfortable for me. Now my preferred setup, just my shoulders feel up a bit, less tension on my back. So for me, this setup way more comfortable than the shorter setup. Roofing can be pretty tolling on the body, especially if you're not doing things properly. The big thing is cuts. It's quite easy to cut yourself when you're working with steel, off cuts, old steel, re-roofing. So you've got to be very careful how you handle material. A good way to combat the cuts is cut-resistant gloves. So here's some here. Some guys don't like to wear the gloves because they, can't feel what they're working with. Like getting a sheet of iron off a stack is like dealing with a deck of cards sometimes. So then you also have a fingerless option, and still you've got hand protection. I was not a big user of gloves when I first started. I've had some nasty cuts, but there is some basics of handling material quite safely. When you pick up something that's been cut, like this edge has been cut, so the last thing I want to do is put my palm on it and slide my palm over it. So I like to handle material with my fingers, leaving a gap between my palm and the material. I'm just holding it with my fingers. Same up top, sort of hold the sheets away, my palms away, nice comfortable grip. And then, because you're passing the stuff to other people and they're pulling it, so you don't want your hand to slide through and get cut on your palms or your fingers. So you just want to keep the sharp edges loose through your hand and let the material slide through. Another thing is we also always roofing, always head down, ass up, working on the roof, pulling out the roof. So you're always bent over and it's hard work on your lower back, your mid back even, and you can even get a sore neck from hanging all day. So whenever you get the chance to get that work off the ground, you should take it. So if I was going to be cutting and ridging, I'd set up something as simple as a 3-step ladder or a full step ladder, and I would just grab the material, feed it through, and then it's quite obviously at a better height than me being bent over. I can mark it. It's sitting there if I want to fold it. I don't have to hold it up and fold it. It's all there for me to go. It's roofing iron. When you're cutting roofing iron, it's best to control it when it's on the ground. It's a better positioning, better movement for your body. But cutting in flashings and that, you can utilise the scaffold, buckets, trestles. If you're doing a lot of tray roofing or tray wall cladding, you could set up tables and lay out a dozen sheets at a time and do all the tops as you come through. Saves a bit of time as well. And you're getting your work off the ground. So whenever you can, take the chance to use the scaffold, use what you got lying around, get your work off the ground, give your back a chance for half the day, you know, a couple of hours a day, give your back more of a chance to be upright. Next time you're driving home, sitting in the wagon, sore back, think about, oh, maybe I should have done that spouting up on the table during the day. So again, just small things you can do here and there to get yourself upright and straight, stretch out, will prolong your roofing career or your livelihood, your lifestyle. Just think about your back when you're sore, going, oh, could I have maybe not bent over and tried to cut that flashing in place when I could have just taken it off and put it on some trestles. Just think about that next time you're in pain.